Hello and welcome to the TenKei ATM YouTube channel. The title of today's video is called the 2-to-1 ratio versus the 1-to-1 ratio. So first of all, what is a ratio? A simple example of a ratio is that saying 1 step forward, 2 steps backward. That's a negative ratio. You're going 1 step forward, 2 steps backward. Okay? We really want to be discussing positive ratios, as in 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. And a ratio which doesn't quite cancel itself out, but a 1-to-1 ratio is 1 step forward, 1 step backward. You're not really going anywhere, are you? 1 step forward, 1 step backward. With a 2-to-1 ratio, you are making progress. A 2-to-1 ratio and a 1-to-1 ratio are both positive, but the 2-to-1 ratio is better than the 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, now this is how you can explain a 2-to-1 ratio in this example here. Imagine you have yourself standing here, and then you step forward once, step forward twice. Then you step backwards once. Then you step forward once, step forward twice, and then you step backwards. So as you can see, this 2-to-1 ratio here means it's 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards. 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards. 2 steps forwards, 1, and you end up moving ahead. So you end up ahead of the game. A 1-to-1 ratio is still good, but we have to ensure that the movement forward is not so much the movement forward needs to be, in a sense, it needs to be greater than the movement backwards. So it could be 1 big step forward and 1 small step backwards. Okay, that's one of the ways you can explain it. But look at this. Look at this. A question was asked. So this question is asked. So on a live account, would you only run one or the other? Meaning, would I run the 2-to-1 ratio, or would I run the 1-to-1 ratio? Any preference as to which one? Or should I just test this out myself? We would say on a live account, you would only want to run one, because if the 2-to-1 ratio and the 1-to-1 ratio have exactly the same settings, they are going to place exactly the same trade. Now, when we say settings, if you look in here, 2-to-1 ratio, this one sets up in a way, whereas if you look at this, the max stop loss here is 5 and the lock-in trigger pips is 10, and thereafter everything is 10, and then the trailing stop is 1. That's a 2-to-1 ratio, 5 and 10. So it's a stop of 5, it's a limit or take profit of 10. Not quite take profit, but that's where it locks in. This one here is a 1-to-1 ratio. This one here, it shows we have a stop loss of 13 and a lock-in trigger pips of 13. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay? When you use the 2-to-1 ratio, you'll be using this, the TPT over here. And the TPT here, this here, is actually set for a 1-to-1 ratio. A 13 here is the stop loss. Sorry, your take profit 13. Your stop loss is 39, which is 3 times 13. Auto trading time is 7, but the lock-in, or the lock-in trigger pips, is 13. So if we close this one down here, we would want to activate this trade here by going here. Okay, but this one you would not want that activated at all. You'd say click it there. And then, so you have it like this. So this is, starting off, this is, let's remind ourselves again, just look by looking at this. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. So the 1-to-1 ratio and 2-to-1 ratio must not be traded on the same chart in your live account. It's one or the other. Okay, if you have two live accounts, trade them separately. Okay. So we just pull this one back over here. So in these settings here in the 7.0, the T7, all these settings here are exactly the same. All exactly the same. This is going to trade the FTSE, DAX and Dow, or at least it's looking at the setup as the triplets. Everything here, and this will all be explained in time. Videos are coming out for this as well. Everything's the same except for this section here. This section here. Okay. Stop loss is 5 on a 2-to-1 ratio, and on this one the stop loss is 13. Okay, so I know some of you don't like the number 13, but we'll talk about that. So now on a 2-to-1 ratio, the stop loss does not have to be 5 and 10. It could be whatever you want, but 5 is the lowest we would want to go for a stop loss on the DAX. If you are trading, for instance, 2-to-1 ratio on a FTSE, that's safe. A 4 or 5 or anything above. If you're trading a Dow, you want something like maybe a 10 to a 15 on a Dow, and we can discuss this in time. So you can have a 2-to-1 ratio of 4 and 8, 5 and 10, 6 and 12, 10 and 20, 15 and 30. Do you get that? But the main point is, especially on a live account, only run one. Now, in ending, let's go back to this 1 minute. Over here, this TPT is set for a 1-to-1 ratio. On the 2-to-1 ratio, the TPT is set like this. We've changed the numbers, so from 13 down to 12.5 and 37.5, which is 3 times 12.5, and look, the numbers here, 10. So in actual fact, these settings here within the TPT are exactly the same settings within the T7. So that means the price will need to get to 10 to lock it in. Otherwise, there's no point having this number any lower, because it won't be a 2-to-1 ratio. So we're expecting the price, if it's going to fail, it'll go back 5, in this case, 5 against us, but 10 in our favor, 2-to-1 ratio. In this case, it will go back, and this number, it could be any number you want, but 13 against us and 13 in our favor. The number 13, not so much the number 13, but the number which is greater than 5 gives the trade more chance, more room, more leeway for movement. Okay, I hope that answers your question. In order to get this, listen to the video over and over again, but the main thing I'm going to reiterate is, and repeat, is that if you're using a live account, you use just a 1-to-1 ratio on one, that's it, or a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, thank you.